Welcome everybody to my YouTube channel. And today what we're going to be talking about is one among the seven most important things in your life that I shared with us in the last video. If you haven't seen that video, you can check it out on my YouTube page, Femi Diaries. Today, what we're going to be doing, as I said earlier, is we're going to dive a little bit deeper into one of those seven things that I said about the most important things in your life. And in consequent videos, we're going to consider the others. So today, the one we're going to consider is our spiritual life. Now, our spiritual life, if you listen to that video, I talked about the fact that we came from a very intelligent God who created everyone and everything. Now, I'm aware that there are some people that don't believe that there is a God, or they believe that we came from a big bang, or we metamorphosed from animals and, from cavemen and all that. There's so many theories out there about how humans were created. But, I just want to give us a few nuggets today that will help us to go do some research on our own and to verify what I'm talking about, if there is truly a living God or not. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is archaeological studies. Now, archaeological studies have been done, and in those studies, a lot of things have been found from the ancient world. And ruins, artifacts, money, materials, all kinds of things have been found from ruins of civilization, past civilization, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And a lot of things that the Bible talks about, and places and different things. An example is the Ark of Noah. It was found somewhere in some artifacts about the Ark of Noah was found. And measurements were taken, things were checked. And these are things that you could research and find out yourself. The measurements and everything that was given concerning what the Bible had said about Noah, who had escaped with his family in a huge boat in ancient civilization. And the Bible talks about this before the flood came into the world. The events of those things had happened in the book of Genesis in the Bible. And we see that there are archaeological studies today that prove the reality of that having happened. The coming of Jesus is another one. Many of the places where Jesus had been, and even the tombstone where he was buried, things of that sort have been found. And those artifacts prove the reality that he actually came. So these things are things that we could look at through archaeology to prove the reality of a God. Because these things came from the Bible, things that the Bible had talked about that happened. Another thing also that we could also that will help us to lend credence to the reality of a God is prophecy. Now, prophecy, there's a lot of prophetic statements and things that the Bible talks about. One of them being the coming of the Messiah, for example, Jesus. This was prophesied about almost 6,000 years ago. And we see the reality of those things happen 2,000 years ago when he came. Many people who had doubted the reality of the Messiah now realize that these were the prophecies that the Bible had talked about. Look at the days we live in today. It's called the end times in the Bible. These are things we see today. Things that the Bible talked about that are happening today are things the Bible had talked about several thousand years ago, about 2,000 years ago. So we are seeing that prophecies prove the reality of the Bible and prove the reality that there has to be a God. There has to be a God. Because things that have been written, men wrote these things that as God gave them inspiration, we see that those things have now come to pass. So that definitely helps us to see the reality of a God. Nature is the third one. Nature proves the reality of God. Because if we look at how things are fashioned, we see that there is a pattern. There's a pattern, there's a way things work. There are different, we have different times of the year, different seasons, autumn, winter, summer. We have different seasons. There's a fashion, there's a way things work. And all that proves the reality that there has to be an intelligent creator that created all things, who manages the affairs of the earth, who sees to this different parts of nature, weather, and all these things actually happen. So nature also proves the reality of God, that there's a fashion, there's a way things work. Another one is science. Science is a fourth one that also proves the reality of God. Now, not everything in science agrees with the reality of God, but there are things that scientists have found out. I remember one of the studies we did back in school then, talking about the earth being flat. The Bible had talked about the circles of the earth, and later scientists did find out that the earth was spherical. So there are so many other findings through science, that things you could check out and research yourself, that will lend credence and lend validity to the reality of a God. So science also proves the reality of a God. Now, if we do consider these things we've talked about, archaeological studies, prophecy, nature, and science, we should, when we do our research, we can come to a conclusion of the reality of a God. Now, if there's a reality of a God, then we need to connect back to Him. That He's our source. We are like the product, He's like the manufacturer. The product cannot function well without the manufacturer. So we get nourished, we get fulfilled, we live out the fullness of who and what our potential is in connection with our source. And that's kind of those are some of the takeaways I want us to have from this first most important thing in our lives. Again, like we've said, our spiritual lives is very key. Spiritual disciplines, things we do on a daily basis that help us to really nourish our spiritual lives. Examples are prayer, worship, time spent learning and meditating and talking with God, the living God. These are things we do and practice that will help nourish our spiritual lives. Now, if you still have any questions or comments about this, you can put them down there in my YouTube page, and you could do research. I really want people to do research into the things I'm talking about. Again, we're talking about our spiritual lives being very important to our health, a healthy lifestyle. And I'll be catching you guys in the next video. You have a good day.